Well, hi everyone. Welcome back to episode 35 of the RTI Speed Chips with Bob and Chad. Um, we're glad to be here. The last time we talked to you, of course, Chad was live in Bristol Speedway, or Speedway Motor Speedway. Let's talk about your Bristol event there, Chad, and your experiences. So share with us tell us all about that.
Man, what a unbelievable week. Uh, the whole thing was I would say a huge success. I'd say when it was first announced, we were concerned about different parts and whether or not we should be going to a racetrack like that, but it actually went good. We had zero failures. I think I only heard of a couple things breaking. The racing was crazy. It was the one thing about going that much faster, you crash harder, but I think overall it went pretty good. It was fun to get down there, and it was pretty cool to be able, like I said last Monday or 2 Mondays ago when I was there, how overwhelming it is to walk into that place where, I mean, the Cup guys just got done racing there, and it's just an honor to be able to go there and kind of be the premier event there as short track racing, and such an awesome facility. And we did good there. We met a lot of our southeast customers that, it's a long way from Bangor, Wisconsin to Georgia, where we need to go and go to some races and pass out catalogs. So for them guys to put on an event like that and get so many racers from the southeast together in one venue, and we were able to go there, and I think we gave just about everybody there a catalog and interact with them and meet them, and even like there was a couple of YouTube channels there, so to get to meet them guys, and they do a good job for us promoting our products, and so it was a hell of a week, man. It was really a lot of work. Everybody says when you're on the road, it's just you go there and you get to watch racing and whatever, but
Yeah, that's not the case.
it was a lot of work. We pounded the pavement, and our stuff did pretty good. We won all three of the modified classes with our rear suspension, so we were excited. It's always fun to get on the road, go to the racetrack. That's where I was basically born, to get there and meet so many new people from all over that have the same love that we have, and short track racing is pretty awesome. So
Yeah, it looked like a pretty interesting event. I can only imagine. And you said that they said that they're going to do this again next year.
I think in the Cup race there, they said Bristol Dirt 2022. So I assume that I would assume Barry's going to be part of that again, because in my eyes, I think there was just about as many people at the short track Saturday night as there was today for the Cup race. So Barry won't give me the total number of people, but man, it looked like 30 or 40,000 people there for the short track race. It's pretty neat to see that amount of people at a short track race.
Yeah.
I'm kind of joking that I think we set a Guinness Book of World Record for car count at a short track race, and I think we did the same thing for the crowd. I mean, you think of the World 100 at Eldora's 28,000 people, and I don't know what other ones hold a lot of people, but I think Eldora probably had the most people for a short track race. And
Sure.
I wish Barry would just release how many people were there, but he doesn't want to. But I understand why. But it's cool to be able to say that there was that many people there for a short track race too. It shows the power of our industry and our sport, and how much we love to go watch awesome racing.
So what was the total count on competitors anyway?
I'm not even really sure. I heard a lot of numbers between 1,000 and 1,250, and I don't even know what.
That's kind of what we were looking at too. Or that's what I had heard, was in that 1,200 range.
Yeah, I think initially it was 1,400 entries or whatever, but there was a few missing in each class, so I think it was between somewhere in that 1,200 range. But
yeah,
still pretty wild when you think Boone is what, 900 or 1,000. So it was, to that capacity.
Yeah, no, it looked pretty exciting. Okay, well, we got our first question. Anything? Talk about the 5.5 inch the 5.5 inch cup bearings are ready to go.
Yeah, we finally released that today. I know I've been saying 2 weeks for like 8 weeks, but they are ready to go. They are plated, so they're we got more bearings in today. We were waiting for 5-inch bearings, so it's been a struggle trying to get enough product here to support these, but these are ready to ship now. We have 100 ready to go, so
Awesome.
the people patiently waiting for them, including you. Your box shipped either today or shipping tomorrow. So
awesome.
So them are rocking up.
Cool. Okay, first question. What is the advantage to running the new Swift Tight Helix spring on the right rear of an IMCA stock car? By the way, really like to watch this show. Great job. Well, thanks, Derek. We appreciate that. It's kind of what we do this stuff for, is just to kind of give back to the racer and have the racers support us all the time. So it's kind of a privilege to be able to give some support back. The biggest thing is with that tight Helix spring, the way I understand it is that it's something that can kind of actually go a little bit more of a coil bind and actually get a lot of stiffness to that right rear spring, which gives you a side bite getting into the corner. I don't have as much knowledge on that as what I should to really be answering the question, but I think that's from what I understand. And with the stock car being a little heavier, from what I've told, it works really well on stock cars, because once again, you can go in and kind of lean on that right rear. It makes it stiffer, because it's what it is. It's kind of like it's actually like a progressive spring. So when you're coming back off of it, it gets softer, so it doesn't hurt the drive off the corner like if you put just a real super stiff spring in there. So to my knowledge, that's kind of what I understand about it. But I will dig into that a little bit more and have a little more information for you on the next show. Brent's got a question. Bob, 8 to 10 episodes back, you said you used to aim for 60 pounds difference in weight across the front. Is that with or without the driver? With left rear gas shock on or off and race ready with the driver, is the 60 pounds for both a B mod and an A mod? That's kind of what we always shot for, and it's just a number that we always went with. And we usually, all of our measurements are for with the driver in the car. Now, once again, some chassis manufacturers, and when I owned Harris Auto Racing, we actually did the same thing. We set everything up for the average 200-pound driver. But now, when we switched to selling the GRT product, Joe's theory was with the driver, and of course, nowadays there's a fairly broad range of driver sizes, so it's just more consistent to do it with the driver, I believe. We always leave the left rear gas shock hooked up because even though with that gas shock hooked up, it maybe adds about 20 pounds of bite in a static mode, but when you're on the racetrack in a dynamic mode, that gas pressure isn't that big of a factor, because that left rear is pretty much all the way extended most of the time. And we kind of do the same thing. The A mod and the B mod, there's not a lot of difference in how we set the cars up. I mean, we use the same theories, because before we had the A mod, we had a 2-link, or years ago, the A mod was a 2-link car. So it was basically our sport mod back then. So that's kind of my opinion. Jimmy, is there much to gain having your right front through the upper A-frame instead of in front? If it makes a difference, I do seem to run into it a lot of stuff. Anytime you can put the shock where it's out of harm's way is by far a big advantage. Your rate could vary a little bit because you're changing, where it is. I mean, if I was able to run the shock in the stock location, I truly believe that wouldn't be all bad. The advantage of having it in front of the A-frame, you can get closer to the ball joint, so you're not dealing with that ratio of the A-frame. But whatever works best for you. I don't think there's a tremendous amount of performance advantage or disadvantage either way. Brand has, these guys look like they've been ready for a week here. What do you think, Chad? Brand has, I have a question on a 4-length zero bird cage. My chassis company said 17-inch length uppers and 15-inch lowers, but it's not zero bird cage. Is it okay to make the length longer or shorter to get the cage zero index? Also, with the bird cage, where do we start on the bird cages? All mine are in the 5-inch holes. I'm gonna let you have that one, Chad.
So, I mean, if you don't have a zero index cage with the plates with the holes that are offset, then you might as well throw the term out because you can't zero index without that. Some guys, tried to unindex the cage a ton so that when it drooped, it was at zero. Well, that's one way to do it. I don't really like doing that because it makes the car, you have to start so far unindexed. It has to go past center before it starts indexing to build traction. So the proper way is to have the proper cage to do it. Lengthening and shortening the rods, the upper and the lower, is how you index the car statically at ride height. So when you say zero index, when you're at ride height scale, that cage should be 0 to 3 degrees into the spring towards the rear, and you adjust that by lengthening and shortening one, shortening the other, the rods. The whole zero index thing, as far as, it's named wrong. It should have nothing to do with zero index. It should be called compliance because it has, so many misconceptions with it that it's difficult to keep in front of all the misconceptions. But you want to have if you want to do it right, you got to get a zero index suspension cage on there and move the arms and actually go for what we're trying to achieve there. And that's no bar lock in the upper so that your left rear suspension has compliance.
Yeah, and what you end up having to do there is you end up moving it back, like the top one, you move it back on the cage and you move it back on the chassis. Now, if the chassis doesn't have the adjustable mounts forward and backward, you'd have to actually add those mounts. So that's one of the things to talk with a chassis builder. And he's probably right about the 17 and 15 if that's what his stuff is set up for. That's where you got to have a separate set of holes to be able to use that to its full advantage.
So he just said if you do have our zero cages, so if you have the zero index cages and then it becomes what you have on the chassis side. So like Bob just said, you have to have a row of holes to go back on the top from your standard location on the frame, and then a row of holes on the bottom to go forward. So theoretically, we're taking the same bar lengths and just offsetting them so that when the cage indexes, it doesn't bar lock and go over center. So if you do have our zero index cage, you can achieve it. And if you have more questions, I would call us tomorrow and we can walk you through it for sure. But make sure, I don't know what kind of chassis you got, but they probably have plates to get you that extra set of holes if they're running zero. So.
And when we say 17 and 15, that doesn't mean that it might not be 17 and 3/8 and
Right.
14 and so it might be you might have to adjust it a little bit to get everything where you want, but you're still in that window. Andrew's got a question. What would you recommend for total length on a pull bar, and would you have it pointing to the center on the car or pointing to the right front? Well, everybody has a little different theory on how you actually locate that pull bar. Lengthwise, we're still in that 28 to 30 inch seems to be the magical point of that, kind of that magic number. That seems to be very universal. Some guys are running a lot longer, some guys are running shorter, but that's a good window to be in. As far as pointing it to the right front, I know a lot of guys do that. The thing is when you actually go through the dynamics, and I'm quite sure what they're doing, when you go through the dynamics, that thing actually will come to the left. So what we've always done go to the right. So what we've always done is actually offset it slightly to the left, so that when the car goes into the dynamic mode, that the pull bar is perfectly straight in the car. That's just my opinion. Like I said, there's quite a few guys out there that do it a little differently, and I'm not saying that their cars are slow or fast or whatever. That's just my opinion. On an IMCA stock car, what's the best rear percentage to run without getting the car over total weight? Well, I mean, if you could get that thing in that 50, I mean, ideally, if a guy can get in that 54 to 56-inch range is good, but with that motor being so far ahead, you're gonna, you're gonna be pushing that weight just a little bit. But that would be my shooting point. I would try to make my car as light as it could be so I could add that weight to the rear percentage and not be so far overweight. But that's always been a real good number. That 54, 56-inch range is pretty good. Kevin's got, hi Kevin, how are you doing tonight? If your chassis has different mounting holes to change the angle of the slider or the right rear coilover, left to right, what does this accomplish by changing the angle, and when would you use this to tune? What we've actually found on that, it's almost kind of like changing a spring rate in a sense. You put a little bit more angle on the upper or on the coilover, and it seems to soften the rate. I still like running a certain amount of angle in there because I kind of, that triangular effect where you get that motion, because when the car rolls, if you've got if you were straight up and down, the car would actually, the spring would end up being at the wrong angle. So when you start at like a 15-degree angle, the car's always pushing towards the tire. You kind of make yourself an imaginary line between the pivot point of that upper and pivot point of the lower part of the spring. How it ends up going in line with that tire is kind of how it loads that right rear tire. So in answer to your question, when you would change that, I would say, for example, if I needed something a little bit stiffer, I would maybe move it out one hole. I still wouldn't ever go under 10 degrees of angle on it. And you could also, the same thing, if you want to go softer. Trends today more going stiffer than there is going softer. So that's kind of where you could actually start with a stiffer spring, put some angle in it to soften it up if you needed to. But that's what it would do. Just bought a 2014 Harris Sport Mod with a 2015 front end update from BHE. Wondering what you guys run for ride heights. Also, would it be worth it to get it updated? If so, how much does that typically run? Well, if we were to update the front end, it depends on which direction we would go. If we went to the 2019 front end, which is still a very good front end on the Sport Mod cars, you're going to probably spend in the neighborhood of $1,200 to $1,300. If you went to the 2021 system, which has got the Speedway spindles, the metric spindle instead of the Pinto spindle, then you're going to be looking at the additional cost for the spindles. And that particular car probably would work the best with the 2000 or with the Pinto spindles on it. So probably what you have is not too far off. Ride heights, how we measure the ride heights on those cars is we measure from the center of the bolt hole in the lower control arm on the front side of the lower control arm. And the right side, usually we try to keep the right side in that, for that particular car, would be in that 7.5 range. And the left side would be 7 5/8 to 7 3/4. And I'd recommend those measurements are with the driver's weight in the car or the driver himself in the car. Jerry and Steve vote. Steve is watching. Awesome. We'll keep those questions coming. You guys have had some great questions tonight. One of the things that I did want to talk about, we had a couple of guys email us in some questions about the brake floater, the advantages, and I know we've talked about it numerous times, but the brake floater and how it relates to whether you have, like Chad's got the combo cage where you can either lock the brake floater up or you can run it on the brake floater. How about you kind of explain the differences of what the car actually does and why you would want to run one in one area versus the other?
So yeah, we've been making the combo cage now for quite a while. We started out with the brake floater, and then we made a cage with the brake on it all the time. So you'd marry yourself to one or marry it to the other. So then we had a guy go to a long track, a super speedway, basically a bigger track with it on the cage. So it's more effective when it's on the suspension cage, and it's partially because of leverage, and you're farther back in the car pushing through the spring also, and you're hooked right to the suspension cage, which is driving through the upper 4-link rod. So it's a little bit more effective than the brake floater. I would say it's less tunable because it's married to it. So it's going to get it on the right front harder and get the car to turn. So I always tell guys, short track on the cage, bigger track on the floater arm. The floater arm you can tune, you have more tunability because you can raise and lower the arm. If you raise and lower the arm on the suspension cage, then you're doing numerous things, not just your split-second braking advantage of using the brakes to get the car, keep the car up on entry. So it's kind of a balancing act. There's some guys that can't run it on the cage because they brake too hard, and it's on the right front, and they're plowing field all the time there. So it's one of them things that's kind of a driver feel. There's a lot of guys they'll put it on the cage and then learn how to how to reteach themselves how to brake. So more effective clamp to the cage, less effective on the floater, but more tunable on the floater. So you can change the angles of the arm and manipulate that way. So again, I think that's almost going back to one of them things where it's a driver preference, and some guys love it, some guys hate it, So we make the cage both ways for that reason, because when we had it married to the cage, then a guy would go to the big track and he was terrible, and he'd go to his short track and he was good. And it took us a while to put two and two together. And once we went through the physics of it, we're like, oh, well, it makes more sense because it has more leverage. And so then that's when we made the combo, so you could lock and unlock it. So when you went to a tight track, you could have it on the cage. And when you went to a larger track, you could then unhook from the cage and tune with the arm. So kind of a driver thing. Our suspension cages have the option to go both ways, and definitely a lot of tunability. We also make the triple option so that you could put 2 bolts through the housing, like if you wanted to clamp the brake to the axle tube, if you were a lift arm car, or if you wanted to go lift arm, pull bar, back and forth. So we do have the triple option also available for both sides also.
Awesome. Chris was asking about what about the rear for updates. To tell you what, Chris, to be honest with you, I would probably give us a call here tomorrow at BHE and talk to Rocky, just because of the fact that he's probably got some questions. Oh, the ride heights. Yeah, sorry, wasn't thinking. The ride heights on that car, I'm assuming that's an under rail car. So the ride heights in that car would be your left rear usually ends up being about 2 3/4, and your right rear ends up being about 3 inches. So that works pretty well. Just received our OD Grab Cup with the Torrington bearings today. Great product, great service from Chad and the team. Thank you guys, and keep up the good work. Well, Roger, those guys do a heck of a job up there in Bangor, Wisconsin. They take great care of us racers and us suppliers. So thanks for your comments.
Thanks, Roger.
Running a Penn, Ohio type stock car on soft late model tires, do you need as much rear percentage as you would with the smaller hard tire? No, not actually, Eric. You wouldn't. You probably wouldn't need to go, because if I remember right, you guys get a spoiler on those cars too, and if you can run a spoiler, you can run down there at 52, 54%. give the car what it needs. If you get in a racetrack that's super, super slick, it's probably going to like a little more percentage to help get you off the corner. But overall, the more neutral balanced the car is, the better off you're going to be. So in that 54 range seems to be pretty consistent. If running a clamp left rear and a spring on the top right rear forebar on both sides, when drop is limited to 3.5 inches, should you add more rear spring or less on UMP tires for traction? Well, that's a great question. Buck, let me think about that one for a little bit. You're running the left rear clamped up. What's your opinion on that, Chad?
I've never run a car that way. I don't know much about it. I know there's a couple of EMA guys have done it with a 2-link left rear and a 4-bar right rear. I don't really know much. Don't know a whole lot about it.
Yeah, because this has got the 4-bar on both sides when the drop is limited.
4-bar both sides, left rear shock clamped up?
Yeah, that's what he's got. The biggest glitch that he's got is they are limited to a 3.5-inch drop rule, so they can't have a lot of drop and get a lot of rear steer. So, in my opinion, with that UMP tire, I don't see a lot of spring. In my opinion, the tire has a lot to do with it, but the overall weight of the car still kind of dictates what the springs are. So, in my opinion, I don't know if I would change my rate for the tire. Now, in the front, maybe a guy might want a little stiffer right front just because, the tire has a little bigger sidewall and there's a little bit more spring rate into the sidewall. But that's kind of my opinion. What's your opinion on not being allowed to run an upper lube in methanol this year? Has there been any clarification on that rule and allow us to run any upper lube? Well, Travis, I'll be the first one to admit, in my opinion, the motor is supposed to make our race cars and our suspension look better. So I don't have an opinion on the engine thing. I couldn't even tell you what the latest rules has been. I stay out of that motor deal. That's a question for your motor guy, for sure. Jeff, on a 4-bar A-mod, should all the bars be straight in dynamic mode looking forward? Well, I like to see them relatively straight or just slightly towed in. But the biggest thing, because you'll notice, especially with your right rear is the one that moves so much, you'll end up actually having to have in a static mode. You'll look at the right rear, and the right rear will actually be slightly towed out, and it looks just stupid. But when you go through the dynamic motion and the car rolls, you still want those two, because keep in mind, our 4-link cars really were designed after those factory stock cars that have 4-link or 4-link stock suspension. So a little toe wouldn't be a bad idea. And when I'm talking a little toe, I'm talking less than an inch. But straightforward is going to give the car, in my opinion, probably more traction. But a little toe is okay, just because you can allow for some of the movement that you might not see when you put the car through a dynamic mode. Can you explain how to use the load stick, what to look for to go with the travel, since it seems to be the go-to tool now? Well, what I can tell you, the thing about the load stick that's the greatest thing is the fact it gives you a lot of data. And then I'm going to let you take it from there, Chad.
Yeah, so once you get your car scaled and establish a benchmark center to center on your front springs, your front corners, you'll write down that number. Then you'll take the car, put it in the air, and we like to always do it with the car in the air, right front tire off. You want to get the most consistent data as you can. So a lot of people, well, not a lot, some people like to use the load stick on the ground. I don't like to do it on the ground because of the variables. 4-link rod in a different hole, 10 gallons of gas versus 5 gallons of gas, that thing's going to pull different. So we're going to build our most accurate data as we can, and that's going to be in the air on jack stands, right front tire and wheel off. So once you have that center to center benchmark, you put the stick on, compress it with the stick zeroed, then you compress it to that center to center distance. Let's just say 18 inches is your center to center, and you get the number 500. That's now your benchmark. So when you want to change springs, if you're going from a 500 to a 550, you can change it at that ride height number. So then when you're at the speedway, you have that data. You don't have to measure anymore, shake the car, get a bunch of measurements, and try and change springs in a dirt path, a dirt field, wherever racetrack you're at. So you put the spring in, put the load stick on, wind it up to the 500, go to the speedway, and it's perfect. You know the load's right. Where the load stick is helping us tremendously is when you start looking at your down number and your total load. That's kind of what the late models all focus on, and asphalt cars, they're all going off the total load of that corner. So what I would do then is, if you got your benchmark, your scaled center to center, ride height, load number, then you'd go to the speedway, and I like to take my Sharpie and paint the shock shaft. Go out, run on the speedway. You'll have that Sharpie worn off where you run, where you ran most of the time there on that run. If you hit a bump coming on the track, funky, your shock rubber is going to give you false data. So either go off the dust ring or paint the shock shaft with a Sharpie. Then you have 3 or 4 of your homies get on the front of the car, push it down to where that Sharpie line is gone, measure the center to center. That's your down number for that speedway. Put the stick on, go to that number. It's going to give you 1,200, let's say, for your down number at that speedway. So then you put that in your notebook and say, we were here, track B, Saturday night. It was dry slick. We had 1,200 pounds at our down number, and we kissed the trophy queen. That's good data. You want to go off that. So then when you come back and you got a different spring in there and your load number's different, you put the stick on and you realize that you have lost track of where you were over time, and you were 75 pounds more load in the right front, and you didn't kiss the trophy queen. Now you know why. So the load stick is the new tool for getting data, and you can get data from every racetrack, just like we do with the spring smashers on the late models and the modifieds and the asphalt cars. Is you're just building data, and to understand why your race car is good at a certain track and why you're terrible at another track. And you're going to develop that load number, and then you're going to understand why and what you need when you get to a certain track. If a track is banked or if a track is flat, you're going to realize where you need more load, where you need less load, and then be able to tune it. And this tool has given us the opportunity to build a more notebook, just basically more data for each speedway, so that why you're good when you're good. That's all it is there's really, it's just a fancy tool for getting data. So I hope that was good enough, but you got anything?
And the thing, like Chad just said, the key is, okay, I buy this thing and I use it day one. Does that mean that I'm going to go out there and be super fast today? Well, we hope so. But what it's going to do is, if you were super fast today, you're going to be able to record all that information. And now all of a sudden, we can come back here, like Chad just said, and now we have more information, because the thing, everybody used to work on static numbers. And static numbers, the car's never, the only time the car's in static numbers is in the trailer. I mean, otherwise, when it's on the racetrack, it's always in dynamic mode. And this can actually give you, we use, as a rule of thumb, we use a 3-inch number. So say, for example, at ride height, if our shock is 17.25 inches, we'll compress that thing to 14.25 inches and use that number as kind of a data. But like Chad said, the way he explained it is the ideal way to use that tool. I mean, it's just a great tool to make you more consistent.
most important, stay in your notebook or your chassis builder's notebook. Don't compare a Shaw number to a Rage number to a Lethal number to a whatever. You're going to get so spun out you won't know what you're doing and where you're going. So try to be with your team, your chassis builder, and maybe your shock guy. You really don't want to listen to anybody else other than you and your driver and what your feedback is. One of the things I've been hearing a lot about is, I don't know if you've tested different springs, Bob, but you can put 5 different manufacturer springs in the right front, all 500-pound springs, and get 5 different answers. So
Your 3-inch number will be all different.
there is some definite, all this cool stuff, these cool tools, the machines, the sticks. It almost makes me want to be a crew chief again. But
And the thing of it is, and it doesn't necessarily mean that those 5 springs are bad. It's just the way that spring is made.
Yep.
That 3-inch number on all, if you change from a red spring to a blue spring to a black spring to whatever color, you got to understand that those numbers aren't going to transfer just because of the info. But most generally so in other words, like Chad's saying, say you have a Rage car and you've got black springs in it, and then customer B's got a Rage car and he's got red springs in it, and you get to talking to him. Well, his number is 1200. Well, my number is only 1150. Well, it could have something to do with the actual spring itself, which is not bad. It's just, in today's world, there's so many elements to the equation that you just got to really think through all of those equations. It's just unbelievable. And like Chad says, wishes he could be a crew chief again. No, I have no desire. Way too much thinking. Holy moly. It's fun because when you hit on something, it's like, whoa, this is really cool. But, and I like the data. I mean, I've always been a data person, and I think that's been, some of the success that we've had is knowing more about it. Don, my GRT has all rear components. Can't wait to try it out. Very nice product. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.
On figuring the spring table on the rear, is it figured on where it mounts to the chassis, or at the jack bolt, or at the hyme end on the slider? Well, it would be the hyme end and the slider. There you go.
So on the rear, it's always where the coilover hooks up. So if it's higher on the right, it's not going to roll over as easy. Lower on the right, it's going to roll over easier. On a spring separate, it's always where the screw jack tip ends.
Gerald, as I read through your question, my first thought is give Ben Baker a call at AFCO Racing Products tomorrow. But anyway, got a new brake system with both master cylinders being 1-inch, new pedal assembly, new lines, new calipers, new brake gauges. Any idea why I can't get rear pressure? With the brakes cranked all the way to the rear, the brakes are uneven. When I have bled the brakes every way imaginable, tried to adjust the master cylinder rods and can't seem to figure it out. Is this common with both? No, it's not common. I'm not sure. I wished I was. Yeah.
Need to be there, but it's probably the lines.
I would have to say there's probably still some glitch in the line somewhere. But once again, you can call AFCO Racing Products and ask to talk to Ben Baker. Ben's an expert on these brake systems, and he's run into about everything imaginable. I would definitely give Ben a call tomorrow. 3, with the attitude most race cars have today, how much effectiveness is it to put roll centers and center of gravity heights? Well, I think that all plays into a part. The biggest concept that people have always missed over the years is center of gravity and roll centers. It's a number. It's a starting number, but it's really all about where that number goes to. And that's the thing that a lot of people haven't really understood over the years, that I can have a roll center that's 4 inches above ground and 2 inches to the left, or 2 inches to the right, whatever the number would be. It's all about when that car goes through its motion in the dynamic set, where that roll center moves to. I don't think it's as important today as it was at one point in time, but I think it still has quite a bit to do with it, because once again, where everything goes to in dynamic is what's most important. So keep that in mind. So how do you use the load stick on the left front side of the car?
Same thing, just in reverse. So, I mean, you can, again, paint your shock shaft to see how much you're going down, which you don't get as much travel, obviously, on the left front, but you get extensions. So you can use the load stick then to go on the left front and have your ride height number, and then you can jack the car up and see how much extended load you have when you hit the chain, just like you do on the left rear. So that's another tuning feature that guys are just starting to use the stick for, is seeing how much, dynamic load they have on the chain on the left front, and how much they have on the compression. So there's two sides to tune there, where the right front mainly is just a downward stroke, because you're probably never coming past ride height when you're coming down the straightaway, mainly because you have that shock that only moves a 16th from ride height. But so yeah, that's how. Are you using it on the left front, Bob? Building any notes?
Actually, we are. We've actually used that. We started using that middle of the year last year, and the fact was that people don't understand. Well, the adage of the old days of leaving the left front at home, so to speak, is gone. I mean, the left front still is very important, and we've found now with using the chain on the left front, it's all about how much load you still have on that tire when the car is all in dynamic mode. And it really has a big impact on what the car responds to off of the right rear, what you do on that left front. So it's very important to use it, no doubt. Steve has got a great comment here. Had a similar problem. Make sure the bench bleed, the master cylinders, and the bleed screws are pointing up. Yeah, very good point. Sometimes those master cylinders, when they're new, bench bleeding them definitely helps get the master cylinder working correctly, and then put it in place, and that might solve some of the problems. Okay, hey Chad, on the spring and shock swivel mounts on the rear bird cages, are we supposed to tighten them so that they can't move once we have found the center of the travel?
Yeah, so I mean, we used to leave them loose all the time, but I mean, when you get it lined up and run through your dynamic, as long as it's not binding up, you can definitely run them tight. And we actually now, I think you should run it tight, because it's definitely a maintenance thing. If you leave it a little bit loose, and then that lock nut wears itself a little bit looser, and then you miss it for a week, and then it gets a little bit looser, and then you end up having some issues there. So we like to just time them out so that you can run through the whole sweep of the suspension and not bind up, and then generally you have no problems.
Okay. Jimmy also had a similar issue. This is talking about the brakes that we were just talking about. Make sure the balance bar assembly is assembled correctly, aka make sure when turning the adjuster that the bearing and the pedal is moving correctly. That's all stuff that I've had issues with in the past, normally not with all new stuff, but I kind of think the bench bleeding thing might be the key to that one cylinder that's not responding. Does measurement of the spring compression during dynamic and a little math same as the load stick? Well,
not really, because it's not in the same plane. So you'd have to measure not the center to center of the shock. If you could measure the spring height and do the math, that would give you a number. So I mean, on a rear spring, when you're in line and the spring is in line through the coilover situation, the math is perfect. On the front, if you can do the center line of the spring travel and do the math, you would have some math and some data, but nothing really beats the load stick and the ease of building data that way.
Tim, is there a good video somewhere that shows what Chad was talking about using the load stick? Well, actually, there is a pretty good one. It is on, do you have one on your website, Chad?
Well, unfortunately, we got a new YouTube channel, so them videos got destroyed, and it's actually on the board in the marketing room, surrounded in red. Billy yelled at me last week, so there'll be a new full-blown load stick with the standard stick and the dual stick shortly. So probably next week.
Otherwise, I know there's one on the RTI Knowledge Center. Bobby did one about a year ago on how to use that. A mod set up on a lift arm with benefits are they running a 6-coil versus a straight chain? And you probably know more about the lift arm than I would. I would have to say it'd be better not to have just a straight chain. The 6-coil would be better.
You need to have a little bit of a lot of the, is it a modified with a lift arm? Most of them are running a puck there, I believe.
Right.
Some a biscuit instead of a spring. So you definitely want a little bit of a dampening force there. You don't want it to be, when it decells, to hit that rigid chain, and it tends to disappoint the tires.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Anytime you can put something into place, like Chad said, most of those guys are using a biscuit. And you can go on Wehrs' website and see that apparatus that Chad makes. Lowering pull bars on the top of the rear end, advantage or disadvantage? Well, what you're going to find when you lower it on the rear end, it's actually going to need to become stiffer. It actually does give the car more traction. The problem sometimes is I still think that you need to have a certain amount of movement with it. And I know guys have played with that numerous times. Disadvantage is, I really can't tell you what the disadvantages would be. I would have to say it's probably getting into the corner with it being lower, probably is not going to try to drive the car on the right front. So corner entry is going to probably be a little bit freer with it down than it would be with it up. GRT B mod, how much chain drop on the left rear and right rear is a good starting point? Car is an overrail. What we actually do on the GRT car, we start with a 4.5 inches of drop, and then you can kind of adjust it from there on the left rear. The right rear, I don't actually have a measurement. What we do is we actually fix it so that the car never comes off of the spring. And now the spring will be relatively loose in there, but there's no actual gap where the spring comes completely off. And that's how we set that right rear. So when you're scaling it, set your left rear where you want it to, and the last thing you do is you just run the right rear so that when you jack up on the car and the car is hanging there, there's still, you can move the spring, but there's no gap. I plan on putting the Wehrs OD drop cup on my right front and OD tall cup on the left front of my GRT modified. The setup calls for a 500-pound spring on the right front and a 450 on the left front. I've heard you talking about stiffening the springs with the OD cup. Can you talk about this, please? To be honest with you, I actually don't think I would change my springs. I think you're right in the realm of where you need to be. What it does is it takes a lot of the bind out of the spring. So I think the spring works freer and the whole car actually feels a lot freer. But we went up a little bit in spring because I thought it was freer, and we ended up actually, a lot of the cars that we've had, we're still, that 500 and 450 seems to be pretty standard with those cars, even with the new OD Cup. If you're getting too much movement right front spring, I would definitely make some other adjustments in the car other than softening that spring up or stiffening that spring up. But if you have to, I mean, a 525 isn't going to be out of the question. Any comments on that, Chad?
That's pretty spot on. Frostbusters this week, huh? You going?
Frostbusters are this week. I tell you what, we're finally going to get going here. They got practice tonight at Stewart International Speedway, and then racing there tomorrow night. I've heard the racetrack's in really good shape, which I know Mike would make sure the racetrack's in good shape. Then from there, they go to Independence and Vinton, and it could be Vinton and Independence, and then go to Marshalltown, and then we go to Boone Speedway. I'm definitely probably going to go tomorrow. Chad and I were talking about some of my other adventures that I do other than racing, and for some reason or another, my body joints have become a little more sensitive to cold weather. So it kind of depends a little bit on what the weather's like tomorrow night, but I definitely will be going for sure Friday night and Saturday night. Weather looks pretty good. Those guys will have an excellent racetrack, and so it'll be a great experience, I'm sure. But there's going to be a lot of people ready to race, man. We've got people all over. They're just itching to go, and we've still got people that, like Bobby came in real early this morning to try to get a jump on some of the shock load, and then, and understanding from his perspective, he gets a jump and gets all these shocks done, and then UPS truck shows up with a whole bunch more shocks. And so he had a little moment of despair there for a second. And I had to remind him that, it's just part of the deal. But so no, it's I'm really looking forward to the Frostbusters. Like I say, I know Mike will have a good racetrack. I'm not as familiar with Vinton and Independence, so I can't really comment. I'm quite sure those guys will do a great job too. And it's just going to be exciting to have all these nights of racing. I know there'll be more cars Friday and Saturday night. That's just kind of a normal thing. Some of the people can't get off work in the middle of the week and stuff like that. Okay, Buck Scott, I was always told not to run a lot of drop on a 4-bar clamp setup on the left rear. How much should you run? Well, you're still going to want to have the drop is actually still a little bit of the equation of the drop is where you want that left rear tire going to, because it's all about how much rear steer it puts in the car. So you can run a little less drop, but it all depends on, you're just kind of going to have to kind of trial and error on this situation. I tend to like a little more drop than a little less drop, so then I can choke it down. If I'm getting on the right front too much, getting too much steer where the car gets a little too free in the middle of the corner, I can choke that drop down and control it. Where to me, it just seems like sometimes if I start with the chain a little shorter, it's more of a gamble on going the other way, but that's just my mind and how it works. It doesn't mean it wouldn't work the other way. Okay, left front chain link on a modified open motor. Well, I can't really give you an actual left front chain link, Jeff, because it just all depends on where your chain is actually mounted. As a rule of thumb, I start my cars out with 1.5 inches of drop on that left front tire. So whatever your shock measure is 17 inches, I would set my chain so that my shock measurement is at 18.5 inches, and set my chain there. And then you can really tune it pretty easy from one side to the other side. More than likely, you'll probably shorten it up a little bit, but that seems to be a pretty good deal as a rule of thumb. Have an older square tube metric car. Which would you recommend, standard 3-piece spindles or the 3-piece pintle spindles, and why? Well, I think the pintle spindle, the standard metric spindle, if I'm not mistaken, still are a little bit more kingpin inclination. The 3-piece the new three-piece spindles, I think they've got less, they're only at like 7 degrees inclination. And the thing that I've found with the new spindle, when you take some of the inclination out, it seems to actually make the car pick up a little bit of mid-corner speed. There's just a little bit more speed in phase 2 of the car, and I just think it's because when the car gets on the right front, it's not changing so much as where when you have a 10-degree spindle, your camber or your caster gain is quite a bit more. So that's just my opinion. With the three-piece spindles that are modified, are spacers necessary between the steering arm and tie rod heim, or just for bump steer adjustment? Just for bump steer adjustment. Most of the time, like on our cars, when we went to the three-piece spindles, we're using a very small spacer in there to get the bump steer right. Seems as if the left front is bound up when jacking it up. I would still put a 1/4 of an inch spacer in there. I think I'd have to look at my notes, but I think we've got 5/16 on our left front and 3/8 on our right front is what it ended up being for the bump steer, or it could be the other way around. I'm not really sure, but it was a very small spacer. Not like what we used to run. We used to run those 1.5 to 2 inch spacers for sure. Well, we got 3 more minutes. I'm excited about the Frostbusters. It's going to be a lot of fun getting out there to get to see everybody and see their new cars. And you got that experience last week at Bristol, so I'm looking forward to that. I have not been to an actual race this year, so I'm excited about that. And all the racetracks that are on that circuit are all good racetracks, so it's going to be some great racing. One last question. Chad, can you explain in detail about your 2.5 right front spring drop cup? Thank you.
So I only have a standard cup here, but so what the drop cup does is, this is a standard one, so the bearing is right here. So the spring table is determined where this bearing is, where the end of the screw jack is. So if you have this in the left front and then your right front, the bearing is lower, the car would essentially roll over easier. So if you picture, it's basically like thinking of a teeter-totter. So if I'm lower on this side and I got to go up over that side, it's going to be really difficult. If I'm lower on the right front and I go in the corner, it's just going to easily tip over. So that's the easiest way to think about spring table, is you hold a pen in front of you. If the right side is higher, it's going to be hard to roll over it. If the right side's lower, it's going to roll over real easy.
And what it is it's kind of a timing thing. It's almost like a camshaft in a sense. It has to kind of go up, 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 and then it falls over. It's not a consistent motion whereby when you have the drop cup, it's already started over there and it just rolls over there and loads that tire nice and smoothly. It's just a much smoother transition. So sorry for all the questions that I have for the 2004 Pierce. Buck, I wish we could help you a little bit more. I'm not as familiar with that car as I would like to be, but most all race cars are very, in my opinion, they're all sisters in some way, shape, or form. So I hope we were able to answer some of your questions. That clamp question, in my opinion, having that left rear clamped up on that spring is definitely going to give you more traction. Sometimes, though, the timing of that traction can be a little inconsistent, so it's going to really be a lot left up to the driver on how consistent he runs it. So once again, that's just it's kind of a driver preference. Traction wise, that's the same setup that Jeff Taylor won the Super Nationals in 2012 on, and we've seen some races won last year with that same setup. So it's pretty good. You do get more movement with it. And so I can see why some people recommend, less chain drop, but the chain drop still is all about where you want the left rear tire to be. Chad, with the drop cup on the right front and the tall cup on the left front, what size weight jack bolts will I need? Well, that's going to kind of depend on your race car.
I'd say most common would be a 9-inch right front and a 4-inch left front, or a 6-inch left front. So that's what I would say.
Yep. What length is what I meant? Oh yeah, we got you, Chad. No problem. Yeah, you end up having to have a little longer one on the right front because that spring, it needs to be 2.5 inches longer than it would if you had a regular cup up there. So a lot of times, that's what we sell is the 9-inch for that right front. And I think we actually use a 6-inch on the left front. I don't know why we use a 6-inch because the 4-inch would definitely work. But all right, well, we've had another nice night. You guys had some great questions tonight. I appreciate all your questions, and we look forward. We'll see you back here again in 2 weeks, and look forward to answering some more questions. We'll have some races under our belt, so we'll have some more racing knowledge or more racing technical stuff to talk about. So we're excited about that. And thanks again for tuning in. And guys, I do really appreciate your business. I know Chad does too. We enjoy doing this every other week.
For sure. It's a good time.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.